We think yes. The UK is quite interesting because there is no concept of national identity in terms of a scheme like you have in other countries where there's an ID card scheme. In addition to that point though, trust is relatively low in institutions like governments and banks. So it's improbable that there would be one institution that you'd probably trust with your national identity. The key to a strong uptake of a national identity scheme, or the key to its success actually, is supporting both the adoption of users and the relying parties. So the scheme needs to cater for both. Given the unique aspects of the UK digital landscape for identity, it's really important that flexibility is available. That could take the form of choice, so the option to have multiple identity providers. It's unlikely that you and I would be comfortable necessarily having the same identity service that would unlock our health records as it would our insurance records, for example. But there needs to be simple, common modes that are in place so that the whole scheme itself, the whole system, is highly usable. It's usability that's probably the most critical success factor in offering a national identity scheme. So putting that all together, this implies that a modular, interoperable framework that can evolve with the digital identity demands of the UK is what we need. If I think about the question you're asking, essentially, the framework should be that you're trusting one or maybe multiple identity providers with your personal information. The relying party should not necessarily need to get access to your personal information if the framework allows for you to give that once and then get access to multiple relying parties with one identity provider. The modes could, of course, be different. Fingerprint is one. We believe that face is the strongest form of customer authentication, or rather we believe that face is the best biometric, primarily because it's the biometric that's included in national identities. So you tend to see a photograph of somebody's face in your passport, but you're less likely to see a thumbprint, for example. I think it's definitely the case. I think people are more comfortable with it, but it has to be a usable format that they feel that they can trust. One thing is that the use of biometrics on mobile phones has definitely made it at a high level much more acceptable to use biometrics in national identity. So that use of biometrics on mobile phones, for example, has made it much more acceptable to use biometrics for identity, but the difference in risk profiles is great. So for identity purposes, it has to be highly secure. The risk factors are much greater than unlocking your mobile phone, for example. So if you take that point that the risk profile is very different, security becomes more important. But it's so important that in the pursuit of providing that security, that it doesn't become a cumbersome experience, because usability is always going to be the driving success factor of any use of biometric authentication. In fact, the core value of biometric authentication is the convenience. I think there's a lot of things that consumers aren't yet aware about in terms of the use of biometrics and combined use of different modes of security. And one of the things, we created a survey in the UK and we asked people if they knew what a deepfake was, and only 25% of the UK knows what a deepfake is. But after a little bit of information, a few lines of explanation that your face is not a secret, we're not dealing with secrets anymore, which is the knowledge-based authentication that works with passwords. In this case, you can copy a face and you can synthetically generate video imagery that looks like you, perhaps even talking. Once they knew that, 72% said they really would like systems that would defend against deepfake. So it's clear that there's very little information out there yet, and that awareness is driving changes in consumer behavior and expectations. So there is a lot of detail around how safe and secure you can make them. It's actually a really, really hard problem to solve. The truth is, we know that you can make them secure and effective, but there's a high degree of ranges of solutions that are available, and not a lot of awareness from the buyer's perspective about all the different risk factors that they have to predict against. For example, right now, there's two terms in circulation. One is liveness, and it deals with the idea of preventing something that's being presented that looks like you or I, but it's actually an inanimate object or a synthetically generated object presented to a camera. That's liveness. But when you factor in all of the other ways that you can spoof the system, such as things that are actually injected that were never really there, synthetically generated video, deepfakes, that's a whole nother level of what's considered replay attacks and deepfake attacks that we coined the term genuine presence to describe covering all of those different factors of risk. So yes, it's possible to make it secure and effective. There's a whole range of solutions on the market. There's a lot of information you need to know about what you're defending against to make a good choice.